everyone, it's Thomas here. So today I'm going to talk about the Billie amp that I have over here. It's from the company Heaven 11, and this is the second video I'm making on this integrated amp. For those of you who have not seen the first video where I interview Itai, who is the owner of the company, please go check it out, as it explains a little bit of the things that I'm going to cover today. Now, in the interest of time, I am not going to go into detail because Andrew Robinson, as well as Jay from the Next Best Thing Studio YouTube channel, has already covered this unit, and they did a good job at it. So instead, I'll spend the time talking about how I feel about the unit. So for those of you who have never heard of the Billie amp, it's an all-in-one integrated amp that retails for $1,450. Has Bluetooth, a phono stage, built-in DAC, tube preamp, and a Class D power amp. If you think about it, it is reasonably priced, because if you were to buy separate components, well, at least to match this level of performance, yeah, it'll easily go over their asking price. Of course, you can buy cheap gear and start putting them together, but I'm not sure you're going to get that kind of performance. Now, to speed things up, I'm just going to jump into how it sounds. Now, my first reaction is, yeah, it's relatively neutral. Now, I use the word relatively because nothing is neutral, but compared to all the other integrated amps I've tried, that's more than 20 of them, I would say this is voiced to be relatively neutral. So what it means is that I don't hear exaggerated bass, I don't hear exaggerated treble, like the V curve, which I personally like. So the Billie amp was definitely a welcome change compared to the gears that I'm used to. Although V curve is great, after a while, change is also good. So starting with the bass, I guess it's part of the characteristic of Class D, which I mentioned already in my video on Class D, where you don't have that same kind of punch as Class AB. If you take 100 watt Class AB, 100 watt Class D, the way they handle bass for me is a little bit different. Class D is fast, well controlled, and I find it a bit more detailed when it comes to bass. And that's what I found with the Billie amp. You don't have the same weight as, let's say, compared to my Creek Destiny integrated amp. This one's a 100 watt Class AB integrated amp, but you have good control with the woofers, as well as you got speed. And when bass is not exaggerated, you actually end up hearing a bit more detail in the mid bass. Next, I'm just going to jump up to the treble part. What's great about the Billie amp is that it rounds off the top end, but it doesn't roll it off. Now, the reason why this is important to me is because I hate gear that rolls off the top end. It's like taking the treble and just dropping it, so you lose detail. And I mean, you hear all the information, it's just that you have to put a lot of effort into it when the gear is voiced that way, where they just roll off the top. With the Billie amp, it is not like that. And for that reason, it paired well with my Focal Canta, it paired well with my Totem Earth. Now, these are very revealing speakers, and yet when I listen to them with the Billie amp, I don't find it overly aggressive, the top end. And that's why I say, yeah, okay, it does a good job at rounding off the top and not rolling it off. Now, the advantage of having tubes, of course, is that you have a great holographic soundstage. What I noticed with the Billie amp is that instrument, the way they're placed is different than my own reference gear. So for example, there's this YouTube video that I watch all the time, which I'm going to show here on the screen. And there's this part where this lady played with this, I don't know what this instrument is called, some kind of drum. And when she taps on it, I noticed that the sound coming from the drum, it's less louder compared to my own reference gear. And as I listen carefully, I notice, oh, okay, so it's placed further into the soundstage. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, the Billie amp has a deeper soundstage compared to my other gear. So in that sense, the tubes are great in creating that holographic soundstage, which I've already mentioned in the past. That's one of the advantages of having tubes. So let's move on to the mid-range. Now, because of the kind of music that I listen to, mostly voice, I think this is where the Billie amp excels. And maybe it's because it uses ECC 99 tubes. That's why it sounds more quote-unquote real relative to all the other gear that I have. I don't play musical instrument. So therefore, if you ask me how does this sound with piano, the truth is I don't listen to piano every day, so I don't know how it sounds compared to a real piano. But what I do know is the human voice. right? We hear it every single day. So that's why when I A/B test this Billie amp against other gear, I noticed that, wow, the human voice sounds pretty, quote unquote, real. You know, we always hear this term is buttery smooth, right? Get the tube amp and it'll be buttery smooth. The truth is, human voice is not buttery smooth. There's a bit of texture to it, right? And this is where I think the Billie amp does really well. It is not buttery smooth. There's texture. And I use this term texture because I've noticed that listening to some of the gear recently, like Zoo Audio, Omega speakers, Triangle speakers, and I've noticed that when it comes to human voice, they do really well because there's texture to it. It is not silky smooth. And that's where I really appreciate the Billie amp. So for those of you who mainly listen to vocals, I think this is where the Billie amp really shines. So in short, the Billie amp is relatively neutral. I will even go as far as to say slightly cool side of neutral. So it is not a warm sounding amp, even a little bit thin. Now this has its advantages, meaning that when it comes to instrument separation, it's fantastic. Because anytime when you have a system that is overly bloated when it comes to bass, instrument separation is not as good. All right, so let's talk about the caveats because nothing is perfect at any price. Now, first of all, you have the noise floor problem. Anything that has tubes in it will have that issue. As long as you don't have speakers that are 96 dB, it's really not an issue. Now, once you have speakers that are 94, 96 dB, you hear a bit of a hiss if you're very close to the speaker. Now, from where I'm sitting, I don't hear it, especially when the music is playing. Now, second of all, it is rated at 61 into 8 ohms. I personally am used to amps that are in the 200 watts, 150 watt. So I do wish that it has a bit more power. And finally, I wish it was a bit more dynamic. So for me, the unit is great for vocals, for EDM, for music that are very dynamic. It can be better. I'm not saying that it is not good, it's just that it can be better. Yeah, those are the caveats. Of course, there's no remote control, but I've noticed that the knob, the volume knob, there's a motor built in. For now, there's no remote, but eventually they will have a remote for it. All right, so next let's talk about what was shockingly good with this Billie amp. And for those of you who are new to my channel, now over the years I got a chance to try a lot of gear at my place, from budget to pretty good gear. So just speakers alone, I've probably gone through about 70 pairs of speakers, let alone amps, power amps, DACs, and so forth. Just power amp, maybe 30 plus, maybe more, don't remember. So what I've noticed, because I try gear from a different price bracket, is that you get what you pay for. You see here, what I have here is a Sopra 2, Focal Sopra 2. My expectation for a Focal Sopra 2 is like here, because it's kind of expensive. And my expectation for a Triangle Bro 3 is around here, right? Everything is relative. For something to blow me away, to impress me, the expectation has to be here and the performance has to be somewhere here, okay? So over the years, there are maybe 2 or 3 that was really impressive. The first one was the ELAC Debut 6.2. Now keep in mind, I know in today's world, the ELAC 6.2 is like whatever, if you don't have that kind of performance minimum, don't even bother bringing to market. But at the time when I first tried it, I was blown away. It was like $200-300. Performance, I was expecting it to be here, and it was somewhere like this, of course, when I pair it with really good gear. Next, the Freya also impressed me. I don't know about the Freya Plus, never heard it, but once you change tubes on the Freya tube preamp, it was quite impressive. Of course, I am aware of the difference between a Freya and, let's say, an Audio Research LS25. There is a gap, especially if you're somebody who understands nuances, and that's usually where the differences is. Comparing high-end gear and not so high-end gear. Now, the third piece of gear that blew me away, that impressed me a lot, even more than the Freya, is actually the Billie Amp's tube section. Now, congratulations to those of you who actually owns the Billie amp, because when it comes time for you to upgrade, you can just go buy a power amp and you're done. Well, if you want to upgrade the DAC also, yeah, go buy a DAC and you're done. Now, for you to get something that's way better than the tube preamp in the Billie amp, you probably have to spend $4,000 and more. I know that because I A/B tested against the Audio Research LS25 I have here. Because one day I decided, you know what, I'm gonna plug in my power amp to it and my DAC to it, and I'll just use the tube preamp just to see how good it is. And I was blown away, man. I had it hooked up to the Zoo, for example. So I plugged the Billie amp to the Moon W5.3 because this worked better with Class AB than Class D for this Zoo. And I was like, whoa, I've never heard the Zoo like that. It was a great match because the Billie amp is good for voice. You know, the Zoo is great for mid-range. And I was like, wow. I emailed my friends right away and tell them, guys, you gotta come check this out. This sounds amazing. I also tried it with the Sopra 2 and the Focal Canta by plugging it to my Class C, Class D power amp. That's about $4,000, that power amp, and I use it to drive these two speakers, and it was phenomenal. In fact, I was like, I think I like it better than the Audio Research LS25. And I'm like, maybe it's just me, right? It's the bias thing. You're voting for the underdog. You're voting for hoping that this will outperform the LS25. And then I had friends dropping by. And so I had 3 other people listen to it. Frederick heard it. He liked both. For him, there was no clear winner. Then I have a subscriber dropping by. He owns a pair of Harb F30. Very good at listening to vocals. It's his kind of music. And he was like, wow, he actually prefers the Billie amp over the LS25. Next, I have Mr. Focal Canta. He's the one who owns the Audio Research LS25. So he's very comfortable with it. He has the Audio Research LS28 before, the 17, and a lot of tube preamps. And when I let him listen to the Billie amp compared to the LS25, even he agrees, say, yeah, you know what? I think the Billie amp sounds better when it comes to vocal. Now, I purposely only play vocals, like tracks, vocal tracks, because I know when I listen to other type of music, because I A/B tested, of course, the Audio Research LS25 is better control, better separation, and so forth. But the vocal, the way it sounds, even me, I prefer the Billie amp over the Audio Research LS25, which at the time I think probably was $4,000, right? The Audio Research. So that's why it's great for those of you who already owned it. You have an upgrade path going forward. And finally, I did talk to Mr. Vintage. Oh, by the way, for those of you new to my channel, I give my friends nicknames. Mr. Vintage because he only plays with vintage gear. And even him, he told me, yeah, he noticed that the Billie amp is more, it has a higher end sound than the Schiit Freya. Now, I'm not saying that overall it is better than Schiit Freya, because for sure there are many things that it does as well, if not better than the Billie amp. But when it comes to vocal, it is our preference. And once again, let me just emphasize, I'm not saying that it is better than the LS25, it's just that we prefer it when it comes to vocals. All right, so let's talk about who is this Billie amp for. Now, I would say my first reaction when I heard it is for the more experienced users. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by experienced users. So when we talk about integrated amp, for example, in this case, I can understand when people compare, let's say, how does this Billie amp compares to whatever, the Marantz PM5003, for example. If you're somebody who has experience with a lot of gear, you know quickly that if I say something is relatively neutral, you're not going to compare it to something that has a V curve. Because you know what you like as an experienced user. You know that V curve is for you and you only like gear that are voiced that way, then you will not look at anything else. If you're somebody who have a lot of experience and you know that relative neutral is what you're looking for, then yeah, the Billie amp is definitely worth your time. And I think it's important that I clarify this. It's because the Billie amp has a free return policy. The last thing I want to see is people just ordering for the fun of it, just to try it out and then send it back to Itai. This will bankrupt the company if you guys all do that. So that's why I really want to emphasize on that. For me, the Billie amp is interesting. I even had it pair with my vocal cantos. And then I had them hook up to 2 rail subs, and it sounded amazing. In fact, it raised the question, it raised that debate between me and my friends. You know, we believe that we should spend most of our money on the front end, not the speaker. But with the Billie Amp, I asked the question, I wonder, is it a good idea to buy, let's say, the vocal cantor, which you spend 90% of your budget, and then you buy a Billie Amp with 2 subs to go with it. Well, actually, then it'll be 70 to 30%. It actually raised that debate between me and my friends. And they never heard it with the cantor and the subs, so there's no conclusion to that debate. Okay, so I'm going to end the video at this point. The Billie Amp was funded by Kickstarter. At the time, it was about 600 something USD when it was on Kickstarter. What happened is that the manufacturer miscalculated how much it cost to build the amp. It actually cost a few times more than what was projected. And as a result, Itai was losing money for every integrated amp that he was selling in the beginning. Think about it. This is made in Canada. Everything built in with this level of performance, paying the engineers and so forth. Do you think it is possible to bring it to market at 600 something with a free return? I mean, guys, come on. So Itai told me, however, you know, he's kind of happy that it was miscalculated. Because of the miscalculation, they actually went forward and built the amp. Although he was losing money with every single amp that was shipping out, he wanted to thank his supporters for sticking with him for 2 years. So he was okay with it. And I think, yeah, it was a nice story. And you know, a lot of times we underestimate how much it costs to run a business. So we always think it costs this much to build the amp. You add this little small percentage for profit because that's reasonable. In real life, because I ran a few businesses myself, nothing like that. In fact, you know what? In my first comment, in my description, I'm going to link to a post on the forum. I think it was at Sulk. They built speakers. Anyway, this company that built speakers, they came out and explained as to, you know, how much it costs to run a business. Very short, definitely worth your time to read. And the reason why I bring this up is because, like all my videos, I like to leave with my viewers something to think about. So with that said, check out the link, check out the interview between me and Itai. Like the video, helps me promote it. Subscribe if you have not. I'll see you next time.